There is a quiet kind of heartbreak that rarely makes noise. It lives in the small spaces between people, in the pauses after a message is left unseen, in the subtle ache of giving one more chance, in the familiar feeling of bending just a little too far, for someone who never learned how to meet you halfway. This tragedy is not dramatic. It doesn't explode. It erodes. It softens the voice of a person who was once sure of themselves. It turns someone warm into someone weary. And it teaches the heart a dangerous lesson. That love is earned through sacrifice. That belonging must be bought with self-abandonment. That affection is conditional on how much one can quietly endure. People often think overloving is a virtue, a sign of kindness, loyalty, emotional depth. But beneath the romantic surface, there is an older story unfolding. A story of patterns learned in childhood, of wounds disguised as generosity, of a heart that was taught to survive by giving more than it had. The tragedy of loving people more than you love yourself is not that others take too much. It's that you never learned you were allowed to keep anything for yourself. And yet, within this pattern, there is a turning point. A moment when the ache becomes clear enough to see. A moment when the heart asks, softly but firmly, "What if I deserve to be chosen too?" This is the story of how that realization begins. Chapter 1. It rarely starts with a dramatic moment. There is no grand betrayal, no sudden collapse, no loud announcement that something has gone wrong. Instead, the realization arrives softly, almost kindly, like a subtle shift in the temperature of a room. A person begins to notice that they are tired in a way they cannot explain. Not physically, but emotionally. A tiredness that collects behind the ribs and sits quietly in the chest. It shows up in small moments. When they give comfort but receive silence. When they check on someone who never checks back. When they make space for another's feelings but struggle to find space for their own. And after each interaction, something inside them feels a little lighter in the wrong way. As if a small piece of themselves was handed over without being asked for. At first, they brush it aside. They tell themselves they are overthinking. They remind themselves that love requires patience, understanding, generosity. They whisper rationalizations. Maybe they are busy, maybe they are tired, maybe I'm expecting too much. But the feeling returns. Persistent. Quiet. Unavoidable. It appears at night, when the mind has nothing left to distract itself with. A whisper. Why does this feel like effort when it should feel like connection? The realization does not accuse anyone. It does not shame or blame. It simply reveals the imbalance. The emotional leaning that leaves one person carrying more weight than the relationship ever asked for. And gradually, a person begins to see that their love has become a kind of currency. Spent easily. Given freely. Rarely returned. This is the moment the pattern first shows its shape. Not in conflict, but in clarity. A gentle awareness settles in the heart. I am loving them more than I am loving myself. It is the beginning of an inner awakening. One that will grow louder with every chapter that follows. Chapter 2. Long before a person overloves in adulthood, the pattern begins quietly in childhood. Not through dramatic wounds, but through the subtle emotional negotiations a young heart learns to make in order to feel safe, accepted, or simply noticed. Some children grow up sensing that love must be earned. They learn that being easy, pleasant, helpful, or selfless brings peace to the home. And peace feels like love. So they try to keep the people around them calm, happy, or unburdened. It becomes their unspoken role. The one who smooths the edges, the one who adjusts, the one who learns to need less. Others grow up around inconsistency. Warmth one day, distance the next. Affection offered but not promised. And so they become experts in scanning moods, anticipating needs, filling emotional gaps before anyone asks. They discover that giving more creates temporary closeness, and temporary closeness feels better than none. And there are those who were never taught that their feelings mattered. Their sadness was brushed aside. Their anger was called disrespect. Their needs were labeled too much. So they learned to shrink themselves for love, believing that the less they ask for, the more likely they are to be accepted. These early lessons do not shout, they whisper. They form quiet rules that follow a person into adulthood. Be useful. Don't upset anyone. Love harder and they will stay. Your needs can wait. Over time, these rules become identity. A person begins to think their worth depends on how much they can offer. They confuse self-abandonment with kindness, emotional overextension with intimacy. And so, when they grow up and find themselves giving too much in relationships, it doesn't feel strange. It feels familiar. It feels like home, even when it hurts. This chapter reveals the truth gently. Overloving does not come from weakness. It comes from survival, from the strategies a child once used to feel safe in a world bigger than they were. Chapter 3. When someone loves others more than they love themselves, it rarely comes from conscious choice. It comes from psychological patterns woven deep into the nervous system. Patterns that once protected them, even if now they quietly exhaust them. At the heart of overgiving is the attachment system. Human beings are wired to seek connection, to bond, to belong. But when early relationships were inconsistent or emotionally unpredictable, the attachment system adapts. It learns to work harder, to reach farther, to secure closeness through effort rather than trust. This is where the fawn response often begins. A survival instinct in which a person tries to create safety by pleasing, soothing, and over-accommodating others. For a child, it keeps peace. For an adult, it becomes an invisible habit. Giving too much, apologizing too often, loving too hard. There is also the pull of self-worth. When someone grows up believing they must deserve love, their brain links affection with performance. Give more, be more, try harder. And perhaps love will feel guaranteed. Even when it never is. The mind also prefers what is familiar. Neuroscience shows that the brain repeats emotional patterns not because they are healthy, but because they are known. If someone has lived a life of earning love, receiving love freely can feel confusing, even unsafe. The brain gravitates toward dynamics it understands, even when they drain the heart. And there is the quiet trap of confirmation bias. A person searches for signs they are needed, valued, important. They give more to prove their worth, and the giving becomes their identity. It becomes easier to be indispensable than to be loved simply for who they are. This chapter reveals the structure beneath the feelings. Overgiving is not a flaw. It is a psychological ecosystem built over years. A complex combination of attachment, identity, and learned emotional responsibility. A system that can be understood and gently rewritten. Chapter 4. Inside the person who overloves, there is a quiet war. A conflict between the heart that longs to be cared for and the fear that asking for care will push others away. On one side is the longing. The desire to be seen, to be held emotionally. To feel that someone notices their effort without being reminded. This longing is simple, human, and deeply honest. It whispers, "I want to matter too." But on the other side sits an equally powerful force. The fear of losing connection. A fear shaped long ago, in moments when expressing needs led to disappointment or distance. So instead of speaking up, a person swallows their hurt. They smile when they are tired. They say it's okay when it isn't. They give more, hoping the imbalance will resolve on its own. This creates a constant emotional friction. The push and pull of wanting to protect the relationship, while simultaneously feeling erased within it. Guilt becomes part of the battle. A person feels guilty for wanting more. Guilty for considering boundaries. Guilty for even noticing the imbalance. They wonder if they are too sensitive, too demanding, too difficult. So they quiet themselves again. And the cycle continues. Yet beneath the guilt is an anger they rarely acknowledge. Not a loud anger, but a tired one. A steady ache that grows each time they give without receiving. Each time they silence a need. Each time they choose someone else at the cost of themselves. This is the inner war. The part of them that knows they deserve reciprocal love. And the part that is terrified that choosing themselves will lead to loneliness. It is a conflict that drains the heart slowly, leaving a person both loyal and depleted, both loving and unseen, both connected and profoundly alone. But every war has a moment of pause. A moment when the exhaustion speaks louder than the fear. And that moment becomes the beginning of change. Chapter 5. There comes a moment when the exhaustion can no longer hide itself. A moment when the heart, after years of stretching and softening and carrying more than it was designed to hold, finally whispers a truth that can't be ignored. It doesn't arrive dramatically. It arrives with clarity. Maybe it appears during a quiet evening, when the person realizes they are tired of explaining themselves to someone who never tries to understand. Maybe it surfaces after yet another moment of giving comfort and receiving indifference. Or perhaps it appears in a simple, honest thought. I can't keep doing this. The turning point is not anger. It is recognition. A deep, steady awareness that love is not meant to feel like constant effort. That relationships are not built on unbalanced sacrifice. That one-sided devotion is not romance but emotional depletion. For the first time, the person sees the pattern from the outside. How they have been shrinking themselves to fit into the spaces others provided. How they have mistaken endurance for loyalty, and silence for strength. How they have accepted crumbs of attention, because they were taught to be grateful for anything at all. And in this clarity, something remarkable happens. They begin to feel compassion for themselves. Not frustration, not blame, not regret, but understanding. They see the child inside them who learned to survive through giving. They see the adult who kept repeating the same script, because it felt familiar, even if it hurt. The realization becomes hope. A gentle, profound understanding that love without reciprocity is not love that can sustain a life. That they are allowed to be cared for, not just needed. That they were never meant to disappear inside someone else's emotional world. This is the moment the heart speaks. And for once, the person listens. Chapter 6. Healing from overgiving does not happen in a single revelation. It happens slowly, almost imperceptibly, through small moments of choosing oneself, in places where self-abandonment used to live. It begins with awareness. A person starts noticing the tiny instinct to over-explain, the automatic urge to keep peace, the familiar pull to give more than they have. Instead of obeying these impulses, they pause. A small breath. A quiet reconsideration. A gentle choosing. In this space, boundaries begin to form. Not as walls, but as soft lines that say, I matter here too. Boundaries become less about pushing others away, and more about returning to the parts of themselves they once neglected for connection. The person begins to practice emotional honesty, acknowledging when they are tired, speaking when something hurts, holding their own needs with care instead of guilt. These acts are subtle, but they accumulate. Each one becomes a thread weaving the self back together. Gradually, the nervous system learns safety without overgiving. The body begins to relax in moments where it once panicked. The heart stops racing at the thought of disappointing someone. The mind tests new beliefs. That they can be loved without performing. That they can be valued without overextending. That someone who truly cares will meet them halfway. And perhaps most importantly, they begin to offer themselves the tenderness they have spent years giving to others. Rest becomes permission, not guilt. Emotional needs become valid, not burdensome. Love becomes mutual, not one-sided. The healing is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is steady, patient, and deeply humane. Returning to oneself is not a rejection of others. It is an invitation to experience love, in a form that does not require disappearing. Chapter 7. In the quiet after healing begins, something subtle shifts. The world looks the same, yet it feels different. As if someone has cleaned a window the heart had been looking through for years. Nothing outside has changed. But the view is finally clear. The person who once loved with self-erasing devotion now stands with a quieter strength. Not hardened, not distant, just more whole. They no longer chase after people who offer little. Nor do they apologize for wanting reciprocity. Their love has not diminished. It has simply become wiser. They start to notice the beauty in relationships that feel balanced. the ones where effort flows in both directions, where emotional presence is mutual, where they no longer have to perform for closeness. There is a gentleness in receiving, in letting others hold space for them, in allowing love to be something that nurtures rather than depletes. And in their solitude, they discover a truth they once overlooked: that self-love is not loud or dramatic. It is not a declaration. It is a feeling, a quiet warmth that grows from honoring one's own needs, from listening to the body, from resting without guilt, from choosing relationships that feel like safety rather than survival. They begin to understand that loving others deeply was never the problem. It was loving themselves too softly that caused the ache. Now, they hold both: a tenderness for others, and a tenderness for themselves. Kindness that no longer demands self-loss. Affection that no longer costs their sense of worth. The tragedy that once defined them turns into wisdom, a gentle reminder that love is meant to expand both people, not shrink one for the comfort of the other. And in this realization, their story does not end. It settles into a steadier rhythm, a life where love is neither sacrifice nor scarcity, but a balanced, human exchange, in which they finally belong, including to themselves.